master's power. It's like, I can move you around and do what I want to do, and you get no control over this.
We have a
See?
very cute
I'm back.
producer. She's a riot. Hi, this is WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio, TV, and podcast #1 Internet Singles Talk Network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine.
We're going to talk on a light note today.
Yeah, right.
What are reasonable and unreasonable boundaries? Wow. I kept, we always, we know a few days ahead of time what we're going to talk about. And then I puzzle about it a lot of times in the shower and think, what's so interesting is people like, I think they crossed my boundary, but I'm not really sure because I'm not really sure what my boundary is. And I'm not really sure what a boundary is or how I would set it up or what it even means. So I thought that would be a really good place to start.
You mean like to actually explain what a boundary is? What a concept.
Wouldn't you think? No.
Mm-hmm.
And first, which I think is so fun on the last couple episodes we've had, we're telling the truth to yourself as well as telling the truth to the other person. Because certainly telling the truth to yourself is, what are the things that I always tell people, I like staying upright. I want to be as healthy and as aware and questioning and interested in things and being an interesting person. And I could put that under the category of that's a good boundary for myself. And what sorts of things am I going to add to my day or make sure I include in my day to keep those things happening?
Right.
And I think so often that people go so unconsciously in their lives because they're busy and tired and worried about lots of their personal life, the world problems, that they don't think about, well, what is going to keep me happier? What is going to keep me feeling my best for me? And then certainly in relationships, which is certainly what we concentrate on all the time. And I think establishing that, and I know you have something to say about it, is the first place to start is with your boundaries with yourself.
Yeah. To underscore, actually, to affirm what you said, it's true that most people don't really know what their boundaries are because they are pretty much unconscious, just going through life as it is. And having an understanding of what your life is about, meaning having an understanding of what you like to do in your life, what your commitments to yourself are. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
It's really what boundaries begin at. It's almost like I have committed to myself to take care of myself. I go hiking every morning, and pretty much don't want to give that up. I have certain things to do in my life that are, I guess the word was going to use like inviolate. Like you can't violate those things. It's like if you violate those, you cross the boundaries, which is what this whole thing is about.
Mm-hmm.
It's understanding that what we do for ourselves, consciously and intentionally, as you were saying, is really where we start to define what makes us who we are.
Yeah.
And that from that point forward, anybody we interact with will ideally be aware of, if we're aware of them, and respect the boundaries we create so that we can actually have a healthier interaction with that person. This is regardless of relationship. This is just period life, So yeah, this is a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
Yeah.
So figuring out what's the best way you go hiking, what's the best way to start your day? I start mine with yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone should think about, if you want to get on Facebook, do it consciously. If you want to go out and water your plants or play with your animals or call your best friend, consciously think about how you're going to start your day and keep your promises to yourself. That's a boundary. If you keep your promise to yourself, and if you can't keep it, then have a discussion, because what you're doing is you're practicing how to interact with the rest of the world. If you can interact with yourself this way, you'll be much better at interacting with the world. So you're like, well, no, I'm too tired to do that this morning. I'll probably do it this afternoon. Or, wow, I have an appointment that I have to keep, and this was the only time, so I need to switch my thing. Or I'm going to give myself the day off. Because if you do it that way, you don't run around feeling guilty or bad or frustrated. You've had a conversation with yourself and said, this is my boundary and I'm honoring it. And my honoring it means I'm going to keep my promise to myself about how to, if you just start out with how to start your day on the best footing.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
part of that, what makes that day really work for me, and it is something that I had to learn, I didn't do this off the bat, to be honest,
No.
was to really make my day about making self-honoring choices. Because that sound, because the thing is, a lot of people say, well, I'm just veg on the couch and watch TV. That may not be a self-honoring choice unless you've had a very, very busy week and you need like an afternoon off. So making self-honoring choices becomes an in the moment focus that gives you a reminder that you're of your own value in a way.
Mhm.
So again, these are fundamentals. I mean, we're talking about really basic, I mean, kind of like building blocks to building healthy boundaries, because talking about what boundaries are reasonable and unreasonable, it's good to know what they are first and how to create them. So this piece is really important.
I really believe that. And I'm going to go on, add on to what you said about vegging on the couch. So if you see your week, like look at, oh, my week, this is how my week is going to be. And I'm doing really fun things and they're exciting and I really like them. But oh my gosh, I need to pay attention how I'm going to feel on Sunday. And on Sunday, you go, I need a day off. And how would I like to spend the day off? I think I'm going to spend it on the couch, vegging and watching Hallmark movies or binging on some show that I have never seen or would like to see again. You're still being very reasonable, because when we go, oh, but who does that? Who sits on the couch for a whole Sunday? And that's so unproductive. And what are my friends going to think? And I have all the stuff that I got behind because I was, so busy during the week. I'm going to make myself do this. I think that would very easily slide into the category of an unreasonable boundary, that's pushing yourself to not end up being your best self, because then you're going to get up Monday morning going, oh, how am I going to make it through the week because I treated myself that way? So there's a balance between what really is reasonable for you and what's unreasonable for you.
That's the thing. And what you're saying there is not valuing something as good or something's bad, but what is it that values something that you value for yourself? And yeah, I mean, we're being pedantic on this point. Sometimes doing something less than productive is part of that choice as well, because it's about self-honoring and really respecting ourselves. And those self-honoring choices, frankly, those are probably the best way to guide your life through everything you're doing anyway. One of those things being, and we talked about this in other episodes, about setting up our agreements to work for us. I don't talk about this in an episode a while ago about building trust, is that part of that self-honoring choices is to make commitments to ourselves and agreements with ourselves that we keep, which also means not making so many that we can't keep track of them or can't keep them all, period. So learning what works for us in terms of being productive, in terms of following our passions, in terms of our interacting with other people, whatever those things are for us, because for some people, their self-honoring choice is to be around lots of people all the time because that's what they thrive on. And for other people, being alone some of the time is much more of a priority for them. So there's not a right, wrong on this at all. It's about self-honoring, as in yourself. You honor that, then you'll be in a better place. So that's where we get started from.
Yes. Because then when you start interacting with other people, my truly highest priority until I got into my mid-30s was, what are other people going to think? How am I going to keep them not mad at me? How am I going to make them like me? How am I going to make them not like me? And it was exhausting and a lot of work. And I didn't even understand about having boundaries. There were none. And I was constantly, eventually feeling taken advantage of and dismissed and unappreciated. And yes, there were people who were actually taking advantage. And then there were people that were just like, do you want to or can you? And I go, oh, sure, fine. And really couldn't and didn't want to and was grouchy in my head about doing it, even when they were well-intentioned, much less the people who didn't have the best intentions.
Right.
So what was fascinating was when I finally said, I I think I could say no to stuff, and I think I could ask to have things be a little different. The people who really didn't have my best interest decided I had very unreasonable boundaries.
Amazing how that happens.
And
And
I warn people that have not done this before. Yeah, you're going to find out the people who are only there, and you just accept they're only here for what they can get. You get to
yes,
decide, is it something you want to give?
this is the thing about boundaries being reasonable, unreasonable. Reasonable boundaries are surprisingly unreasonable to other people who don't appreciate what you're doing for yourself, because the
Yeah.
boundaries really are for yourself, not for other people.
Yeah.
They do affect other people because it will give other people perhaps a different way of interacting with you because you've now got some firm boundaries in place.
Yeah.
And for a lot of work with my clients, and certainly some of my friends as well have talked about this, they've had experiences in past relationships where they're so trampled by the person, either emotionally or energetically, that they didn't know they had any boundaries left. And so their job, a lot of times the homework, one reason we work together for a period of time now, is because it takes time to build up and reinforce and solidify those boundaries so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Because boundaries can be a lifesaver, frankly, in some relationships. I don't mean that lightly. I mean that really. Yeah.
Yes. And what I've also found is the people that don't have boundaries have no idea how to even talk about a boundary.
Right.
They just run all over everything if you let them, not even to be mean, just because
They're oblivious.
like they have this open field and they're going to run around in the field because there's no fencing. This is my side and this is your side, and I'm going to invite you on my side after I find out if it's okay to have you on my side. And so that's been the fascinating thing. So there's the category of people who don't care, it's all about them, or they really think they're doing it for your best. And then the ones that are not thinking at all, they have no motive. They have nothing. There's no malice. They just are like running amok. And so once I started saying, I think I have some choices and I think I'm going to vocalize them, it was fascinating to now not only see all these people that I had allowed to run all over me because I had no boundaries.
Right.
How I had to divide them into these different categories because I had to treat them differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was an eye-opening occurrence for me.
I want to switch to relationship for a second, because that gave me, you said that what you said just gave me an idea as well, is that when you have boundaries, because we talked a lot in the show about codependency and other things, and also we talked about love bombing, I think, a while ago. And love bombing basically can be extremely enticing. It can be extremely tantalizing in a way, because when somebody bombs you, you start feeling very special. You feel very appreciated. You feel very invited. The challenge with that is, though, oftentimes when you get love bombed, you tend to drop your own boundaries because you think you're in the right place. And I was talking about this recently with a client, because they ended up with a very narcissistic experience, because most love bombing happens by narcissists. Well, most narcissists love bomb. I'm not sure if it works both ways, but I'm saying it that way for this reason, is that the love bombing is almost hypnotizing to put you in a state where you don't know what your boundaries are anymore.
Yeah.
Because narcissists don't work well with people with boundaries. Let's be clear about that.
No.
And like you were saying, when you have boundaries, even if they're really healthy boundaries or reasonable boundaries, people who don't like those boundaries will think you're being unreasonable. Mm-hmm. And that, we may say that a few more times during the show, because it's such a clear point, is that your boundaries are for you, not for other people. If they don't like your boundaries, that's their issue, not yours. Yes. So when you set up boundaries, know that most of the time, yes, because there are going to be unreasonable times too, but most of the time they're reasonable. And other people may not like that. But for yourself, owning your own space and really creating that framework, or even that perimeter is another way of putting it, where you feel safe, where you feel comfortable, where you feel you can take care of yourself. Yeah. You need that. So don't take it lightly.
So important. And so on what you just said, that if you say one of my boundaries is I'm going to learn first these things about the person to see if I want to keep seeing them. And then I'm going to learn these additional things about them to see if I want to keep seeing them. Where the love bomb wants you to just give up all that and just hop to the middle. So if you say one of my personal boundaries for me is I'm going to still, even with all this lovely attention and wow, I really like it, I still need to find out these other things about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're using your air brakes. You're not going to just go whooshing into the next place. You're going to stop and think and stop and ask and stop and pay attention. And the people that don't have your best interest at heart, they're going to leave quickly. Will leave even quicker, I discovered, which is really nice to know.
Yes, it is a good thing to happen.
And also one of the really good things about establishing boundaries for yourself that you're doing self-care, you're doing exercise and eating right and having friends and activities where you feel whole and useful and like you're productive, will keep you from the two major things that those love bomb people are looking for, and you're not lonely and you're not desperate.
Right.
And those are that's the catnip to narcissists, love bombing people. They sniff out if you're lonely or desperate. And when you're lonely and desperate, I know you will just throw everything to the caution to the wind, and you'll just let them come in without doing any of these steps. And I'm not saying take forever to do the steps. I'm just saying do the steps.
Yes.
Pay attention to each step. How's it feeling? What's their response? What's been their history? How are you feeling out? Let's have you here in the excitement. And then how are you feeling over here too? And it's really helpful. And so that's a super good boundary to have for yourself. And as soon as they start telling you that you have unreasonable boundaries, that's a clue.
Yeah, true. In fact, there was something you said that really sparked something for me, was that if you're someone who basically is feeling so lovelorn and desperate to find love, you're probably someone who hasn't got very good boundaries at this point. Because maybe you've been wounded in the past, or been through a bad breakup, or been through emotional turmoil, and had your heart broken more than once. So your yearning to be loved can outweigh your yearning to be taking care of yourself. I'll be very specific in the wording that way. And so what happens is your boundaries get cast aside, or you may not even have any at this point in time, because your desire and yearning and need is so strong, it overrides all of your other common sense. Mm-hmm. If you're in that place, and you also recognize that if you do what you've done before, you're going to keep repeating it. You don't want to keep repeating those same mistakes again and again and again. This might be the good time, one, to listen to this episode all the way through, but secondly, to think about what boundaries you can create for yourself, because the boundaries you create will serve you well going forward, but also might be a bit uncomfortable and a bit like riding a bike without training wheels. It can be a bit imbalanced initially. So you want to definitely do the work to stabilize your riding skills, meaning keeping your boundaries and getting in practice to become reasonable. So in fact, when they do get installed, they start to become automatic. Because that's the best thing. When your boundaries are automatic, they have to worry about everything, because your boundaries are taking care of you. And that's the idea for them.
So true. And so here we are back to telling yourself the truth, that you're using a litmus test of, yeah, I am a little lonely. Yeah, I do feel kind of desperate. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just can make you a target. Yeah. So then figuring out, start setting some reasonable boundaries for yourself of, what do I need to do to stop feeling so lonely? What do I need to do to stop feeling so desperate? Because that is like the bug spray to keep them away. That when you start feeling like you have friends and you're contributing and you have people honestly giving back to you, then those narcissist people will pass you by. I mean, they'll ping and try and then go, yeah, not a victim here. So there's the way to set the reasonable boundary for yourself. And it's a very good boundary to keep them away.
It's cracking me up, because we're talking about catnip and bug spray. So these
where they came from, they just popped out of my brain. I don't know. They're things I live with in my life. So there you go.
Right. But I love the metaphors, because they really make sense, because catnip definitely has fit in that conversation, but also bug spray, having boundaries that are healthy, as we said a couple of times so far, having reasonable boundaries that to other people look unreasonable is like the bug spray. It does keep them away, because they realize they can't be with you in the way they want to, which isn't necessarily appropriate for you. it is so tempting in relationship to give up the logic and just go with the feelings. And more often than not, especially with the clients I've worked with recently, the what's the word I want to use? The lack of logic, the lack of healthy boundaries, the lack of self-regard led them down a path where they end up being much less in, I won't say control, but in charge of their own life. And they come at the mercy of the person they were dating. And yes, it may have felt great initially, but again, like love bombing is wonderful initially, but that wears off very quickly once you recognize what's going on. So having the understanding that the boundaries you set up may initially make you feel less involved, less connected initially, because you're establishing a new framework, a new perimeter for yourself that gives you a chance to really own your own space. Because the other part of that, and this is an interesting perspective of it, is when you start having healthy boundaries, you tend to start filling up yourself, your space, your beingness with more fullness. You become, to be honest, more noticeable, more attractive, because you're no longer hiding behind something. The thing about boundaries, especially when they're reasonable, is you create this safety space that you know you can trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And self-trust is an awesome skill. And not only that, it's an awesome aspect of attraction, which I think is one of the greatest gifts we don't give ourselves.
Yeah. To really practice that, stay conscious of it. So some of the unreasonable boundaries, I think, fall under the category often of traits. I only date people that look like this.
Mm-hmm.
I only date people who talk like this. It's so limiting. I think it's unreasonable. I mean, I've talked many times about how when I met my late husband, there was nothing physically about him that was my type. And I'm glad that I decided 2 guys before that I was not going to date my physical type exclusively, that I was really going to make an effort to open my trait scale in that way. And I would have missed out on all the inside stuff that I got to know initially. And then the outside stuff became very attractive. So I learned that my outside boundary for the physical parts of a man were very unreasonable. They weren't working for me. Yeah. And I met lots of men that looked like the way I liked, and they kept all showing up, but they certainly weren't husband material. Mm-hmm. Not like they couldn't have been, but certainly didn't happen for me. And I'm glad that it happened that way, not only because I got to meet and marry my lovely late husband, but also to go, oh, duh. And so that's something I could now teach, because I hadn't thought of it that way before. It was,
absolutely.
It's the thing where we say, please don't take advice from people that have been single a long time, because they're really good at that and haven't obviously done their work. Or if you have people that have done their work and they're choosing to be single, that is a whole different kettle of fish, as they say. There's another metaphor.
Yes.
But often the ones who have been single a long time and really want to be in a relationship, it's because they have unreasonable expectations and boundaries. They really do, for themselves and certainly for the other person. Don't you find that when you coach people, Barry?
Yeah, the thing is, I mean, the way I parallel it is the unreasonable boundaries oftentimes are driven by emotional wounding that hasn't been healed. There's such a sense of protection from a place of hurt. That means the boundaries are pushed so far out and so complete, there's no way in, because there's a fear of being hurt again, which is totally understandable and reasonable. However, having the boundaries set up that way doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
That's one reason I love working with my clients on the emotional level, because that healing allows the boundaries to change or transform from being unreasonably scary to being reasonable and healthy. And that's absolutely the case of people who've been single a long time who are yearning to date. And in full transparency, I've been single a long time because I'm doing the work, and I have no focus on having to have relationships to make my life complete, because I know better than that, and I've lived better than that for a long time.
Yeah.
What's trying to say? Oh yeah. is the having a focus on like limiting your choices, like you were saying, like that narrow focus, that sort of, they can only come through this square little spot, and if they're outside that, it won't come through. I can't have those sort of people. Is absolutely for all people, is an avoidance of facing the possibility of a different relationship than they've had before. but also it's creating again an unreasonableness in their boundaries that is not allowing the possibility of love coming from somebody they didn't expect. So, like, when again, just recap this piece. If you have unreasonable boundaries, it may well be because you have emotional wounding, heartbreak, lamenting from a past relationship you haven't resolved yet. So of course you may be carrying wounds that make you scared of dating anybody else. You put up boundaries so thick and so strong, there's no way meeting anybody. But if you're willing to face those pieces of the puzzle, those parts of yourself that are not yet restored, and you do the work to heal, to transform, to become kind and caring for yourself again, your boundaries start to transform as well. It's kind of a mirror in a way. It's a good clue. When you start seeing your boundaries that way, you go, oh, I see. That's my work to do. That's a lesson right there.
Such an important lesson. And as you mentioned, I have clients who they show up and they have, a moat with alligators and a big castle with the drawbridge with 12 locks and boiling oil ready to be poured down on anybody. And then all these archers all around. And I understand you've been hurt. You don't want somebody horrible to get through again. The challenge with all that guard up is a good guy or a good woman is going to look at it and go, I'm not even sure how to do anything with all of that.
Right.
And the other thing I have learned is when you're on red alert all the time, stuff gets through. Because it's like you get kind of used to the buzz. And then if something really shows up, it'll just be part of the buzz. If you're clear and really paying attention to each thing as it's coming up, you can go, oh, yeah, no, thank you. Oh, yeah, please. So I don't take anybody's guards away, but I do, as you know, the same emotional work that you start learning to set your own boundaries for yourself. And then the boundaries will arrive for you to be able to set in the outside world. And then you can send all the guards away and you can let the drawbridge down because nobody's going to get in unless you say it's okay. You just didn't know how to filter before. You don't know how to vet them. And that's what Barry and I teach so every day is to how to figure out what you really want and need and set appropriate boundaries and then call it in and say, no, thank you to the things that aren't right. And yes, please, more of that when things are right. So unreasonable boundaries are never helpful. If your goal is to be in a happy, healthy, long-term relationship and or just to be happier being on your own and or happy being with your family and your friends and your business colleagues, setting reasonable boundaries for yourself and for them. So I love telling this story about my friend Cheryl. She's passed away since, but we were friends and she was always an hour late. No matter what we did, she was an hour late and I would get frustrated. And then I figured out I liked having dinner with her and we would have dinner quarterly and I'm allergic to being late. So I'd pick the place and I'd get there on time, but I'd sit at the bar and bartenders are great. That's their job is to have a conversation. And he'd say, so what are you doing? I go, I'm waiting for my friend and she'll be here in an hour. And he goes, an hour? And I go, yeah, she's always an hour late. And you don't get mad? I go, no, it was frustrating to be mad at her, but she's not going to change. So if I want to be friends with her and have dinner with her quarterly, because I enjoy it a lot, I got tired of being mad at her. So now I just sit here and talk to a cute bartender for an hour and Cheryl shows up right on time, an hour late, because that's her on time. And he'd go, you're really here. And she's not mad. They'd all say that. She's not mad. I go, she goes, of course she's not mad. But I had to learn to get over myself of, is this okay? Is this a reasonable boundary for me? So I never went to the movies with her. I never went to a play with her because I didn't want to wait an hour for her to show up, even in my seat. I'd much rather go in with somebody. So I had different friends for that. But this 2.5 hour, 3 hour dinner that we'd have quarterly, I didn't want to give them up.
Right.
So there's the boundary I set with her.
I love that. And there's also a piece in this about the agreements again, because the thing with boundaries is that you do have, I'll say requirements is the wrong word, but you have a system where you know that with certain people, this is what you agree to.
Yeah.
And yes, having agreement on time is one of the big ones that comes up a lot for people. So
she was never more than an hour late, which cracked me up.
It was exactly. And I was thinking, why didn't you just tell her the time was an hour earlier than that? And so she'd be there on time.
It never worked. I tried.
Oh, just a thought,
I tried.
I'm sure people in the audience were thinking the same question. So I thought I'd say it out loud.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I tried.
Yeah. So the piece of this is the piece of this I want to talk to, because about that piece about agreements about what we have with people. This is what boundaries are about in a way, is having understanding of what it is that you stand up for and what you agree to with your life. And if people agree to that, well, they violate that. And in the case of your friend, she didn't violate, but she didn't match your standards for what you said. But you recognize that the value in it was beyond that. So what that means really, and we're talking about boundaries here, is that it's not hard and fast. If they put one step over that line, forget it, it's done. No, it's about what's going on, what's the motivation, what's the benefit, what's working. So when you do have somebody comes up, you want to date, for example, in a relationship or romantically, and what they present doesn't quite fit your boundaries the way exactly as you have them, don't immediately dismiss them necessarily, because you might discover that maybe your boundary was a little bit off track in the first place. It's almost like just thinking of a friend of mine, property lines. Her and her neighbor had an argument over that, and when they put the property line down based upon the county surveyor, the other person was so far over the line they had to knock down part of their building to be back inside the agreement. I'm using that as an example of that. That's a physical example, but in boundaries, the same idea applies, that you may discover when you really get clear about your boundaries and you find out from somebody else reflecting back to you where your boundaries are, you might go, you know what, I'm going to move my boundaries a little bit. So you have that flexibility and recognize the boundaries are not permeable necessarily, but they are adjustable. Mm-hmm. Because the thing we sometimes do is we say, okay, I'm setting my boundaries. These are the rules. This is the way life is going to be, and nobody's going to mess with it. And then nobody wins. So this idea about having boundaries is such a key part of being happy and healthy in life. Absolutely. But your boundaries your boundaries benefit, and you benefit from having boundaries that can be moved slightly when need be. Not like moving the goalposts, as they say in the commentary, but to move them to fit your life the way it is, the way it adjusts, because your life changes, your boundaries may change. So it's recognizing that along the way.
So you're talking about flexibility and negotiation.
Yes.
Because I like the word negotiation, because the point of negotiation is both people feel like they've won. Yeah. Maybe not as much as they were hoping. Generally, they don't feel like they lost. They still feel like they got some of what they wanted. And often it's pretty even that both people feel like they got what they wanted. And that's the part about where you get to keep revisiting. So, we talk about how Alison Armstrong says, if you could have it all your way, and both people get to say that, and then where are we going to meet in the middle? And then you say, okay, here's our agreement. So we've established a boundary, and right now it's reasonable. And then I had talked a while ago about my friends that have been married forever, and they were not religious at all. And all of a sudden he was, and she's like, whoa. And they had to have a conversation about, how do I feel about being married to somebody who's now really religious? And so he said, I don't need you to move where you are at all. I need to move, and I need you to be okay with that I'm moving. And you don't have to participate in this part. I'm going to do it over here. After all these years of marriage, they had to have a very serious conversation about, she could have said no, because both of them started out with what they felt was a very reasonable boundary. Yeah. And then they both had to go, we both need to do something differently. Oh, dear. And so they negotiated to a place where they still are in their own boundaries. They're a little different now, and they're fine. They're so fine. They're the ones I went to the wedding and got to spend, 4 days with them, and they're so solid and fine. It's such a pleasure to be around people that are in really good relationships. How they work out stuff. Absolutely. I feel like I should get my popcorn and just sit and take notes, because it's just a delight.
Well, the good news is you have to do work with them, like we do with our clients. As much as a joke, but the understanding of that is we get just to watch and enjoy it. A couple of things I want to speak to. One of that, which is, I remember on a similar vein about boundaries changing and evolving. Because before I get to that one, just a sidebar. One way you can tell when your boundaries are not lining up is when you have some red flags and people keep violating those. Like you said, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. That's what you're using. And people do that anyway. That's when your boundaries may be a little bit muddy. You want to clarify them. Because red flags, same as agreements, all these pieces fit together in a nice jigsaw puzzle that we call boundaries in this conversation. Yeah. But I'll speak to another point about how couples change as they grow. I have a couple of dear friends of mine who went through spiritual training with years ago. And they said, because when they both met each other, both from Chicago, they both said to each other, you know, I really like you. I want to get in a relationship with you, but I don't want any kids. What about you? And they said, no, I don't want any kids either. Great. So they got together and got married. 20 years later, she got pregnant. And what was interesting is at first they were surprised and then they were happy. It wasn't like, oh, no, we didn't plan on this. No, it's like that's what they discovered. And their daughter's now late 20s now because it's been a while. Yeah, the baby she got mid-late 20s because she was 2 in 99. So yeah, she's about 25, 26 now. And they're so proud of her. She's a full-on musician. She's got her own band. She's doing her own thing now because she's an artist, and both parents are very creative people. He's an actor, and she does a bunch of artistic stuff too. And the transformation that happened between them wasn't something they just decided. At least I don't think it was. It was something that was kind of just over time, because when they first got together, they were and this is 20 years prior. They were like, this is the way it's going to be. Great, I agree with you. That's the way it's going to be. But down the road, both of their views changed. As I said earlier, boundaries can be flexible. They can be moved. Like you're saying with your long-term married couple, they had a new boundary to reset, to rearrange, because they had a different perspective now. And part of this journey, and it's part of the journey of life, is that we grow and evolve. So our boundaries, to be honest, have to grow and evolve with us.
Such a good point. And along that line, if you start feeling uncomfortable, if you start having a little resentment, if you start feeling annoyed and irritated with somebody in your life, it's probably a boundary thing. So you first say, what is my boundary around this? Do I know clearly what it is?
Yep. 1.
Have I said it out loud to the other person clearly? 2. Did they agree with it? 3. Has something changed? Number 4. But pay attention, please. Yeah. Please pay attention when you start. My friend Joanne calls it whingy. I love that word. She goes, you start feeling kind of whingy. You get whingy. Pay attention right away. Because in our busy lives, which is what I started out in the beginning, sometimes we just let stuff skate by. And those things, that resentment and that annoyance and that anger, will take over. Yeah. It will be the biggest destruction for your relationship with whoever it is, a love, a friend, a family member. So stopping yourself and going, what is it that's really bugging me? And sometimes you find out it's just me. I didn't get enough sleep, or I didn't eat enough, or geez, and then, but lots of times it's like, yeah, I don't like how they spoke to me, or I don't like how they're treating me, or gosh, I really needed this back from them. So then you go have a conversation. Was I not clear about this? Maybe I wasn't. I'll be really clear about it now. What do you think? Could this change? Or they'll go, yeah, no, I decided I was going to do something differently and forgot to tell you, and let's have a conversation about that. Right. So owning when something's feeling off about your boundaries, and find out where you are first, and then where this person is that's annoying you second.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. You were talking about how stuff happens. People change, you know, as you age, as your life circumstances happen, you're allowed to change. It's just good to go, I think I'm feeling different about this, or I think this other person's feeling different, and have a conversation. Because then if you haven't had the conversation, I think that's when the boundaries turn into unreasonable. If you haven't had the conversation, you have to have the conversation.
Those boundaries become cliffs and wedges and all sorts of things that get in the way. The thing I want to speak to, which what you said is so clear, is that the biggest part about boundaries is awareness. Yeah. We talked about this many, many times before in the show, the many episodes about awareness being the first step, is when something bugs you, you call it whinging. It's funny because whinging in my language just means something totally different, but that's another story. Well, whinging to me is like when it's whining on another level.
The higher level of whining. I love that.
Yeah, well, because whinging is a I can't remember, it's a blending or corruption of whining and something else. I don't remember what the other word is. I don't remember what it is. Anyway,
Groaning or something.
yeah. Anyway, so getting back on track. Is that when you got the unsettled feeling, or that feeling of being, your peace is being disturbed, so to speak.
Yes.
The thing is, a lot of people tend to suppress it or ignore it or do something to distract from it. Alcohol, food, drugs, whatever it is. Being aware of it first and go, hang on a second, this is not feeling right. Something's out of alignment.
Yeah.
That's a massively powerful step you've taken to become self-aware. And so by having the willingness to face, to look at, to ask questions of yourself, what's feeling out of alignment? What am I missing here? And then recognizing that it's a boundary that got moved, you didn't realize it, or somebody stepped over the boundary without you realizing it. It's time to, as you said, to change it, to have a conversation, to say, look, this is what I agreed to. Does this need to change, or do I need to have them change? And be honest about it.
Mm-hmm.
Best way to keep your boundaries healthy.
Oh, yes. And then generally, they'll all stay very reasonable.
Indeed.
Yeah. Oh, this has been such a fun conversation. And I really believe that lots of people are going to recognize themselves going, or I never thought about it like that. Or, yeah, I know all these other people that are doing that.
Right.
Go and we'll have a conversation about the other people having this, because that can sometimes be an important place to start. Right, Barry?
Indeed.
All the other people in your life are screwing up.
Oh, yeah, it's not us, it's them. Yeah, of course.
So if you'd like to have a conversation about setting your own boundaries or setting boundaries with other people, because it's a challenge. It really is. I told you, it took me till my mid-30s to even go, I think I need to think about this and work on it.
Right.
And it's a continuing process forever. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. And the way to do that is to go to my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com, and click on What's Holding You Back from Love. And you can sign up to have a complimentary conversation with me. And we'll get to the bottom of setting boundaries and how to do it comfortably and effectively. You can also sign up for my newsletter when you're on my website. And you can click on all the little symbols at the bottom to be part of my social media. You can click on Facebook and LinkedIn and Pinterest and YouTube. And I had a conversation today about Constant Contact and Twitter, and they said they're still fighting. But you can still click on Twitter, but I have to put them in manually now. And then you can also send me a personal email at Christine@theperfectcatch.com. And Barry, tell them how to reach you.
Well, if you also want to work on the understanding or how to fix, resolve, build healthy boundaries, definitely have a conversation. My website is my name, which is barryselby.com. And on that website, on the homepage, there are two options you can click on. One at the top, which is take the next step, which is basically where you book a complimentary conversation with me, same as Christine has. I have the same thing or different titling, which is a gift from me to you. And we can see where you are and what you want to go and if I can help you. At the bottom of the homepage on my website currently, I have a link to join my email list. So you can definitely jump into that and be in my audience to get weekly emails from me and all the other things I share with my audience. On my website, I don't have my links there for my social media. I have them on my email, but also I can tell you what they are. So if you'll reach me, you can, by the way, you can email me directly at barry@barryselby.com. And if you want to follow me on social media, my social media is my name, Barry Selby, on most platforms. So on Facebook, especially on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter /X, Threads, Pinterest. Clubhouse, I'm not been using lately. Clubhouse has changed dramatically. I'm not sure if I'm going to hang out there anymore. We'll see. Instagram is different because it's the real Barry Selby, so definitely follow me there. And definitely check us both out. We have a lot of posts we put up on social media, and we definitely have a lot of space to help you make a difference in your life, in love and relationships. So reach out, get support.
Yes. And you can watch us every week live here at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern and all the times in between. We love if you want to comment or ask a question. And then you can also click on our YouTube stations and have a chance to watch it later and share it with your friends who are struggling with their relationships and setting boundaries. Maybe you'd like them to have better boundaries so they stop trying to walk all over yours.
There's an idea.
And then if you just want to take us anywhere to listen to, like when you're running or working out or shopping, you can get us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everywhere.
We'll say
everywhere you stream.
Yeah.
We're on all the streaming stuff. Cece, make sure we're everywhere. And we love if you would suggest content you'd like us to address. And please like and subscribe when you go on any of our social media places.
We appreciate it, and definitely share it with your friends, because you may not have the issue. Maybe your friend does. Hint.
And we'll see you again next week.
Take care of yourselves.
Bye.